Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We begin with a wordless melody in Nigun, Yedid Nefesh. It's about bringing in like the love and the sweetness of Shabbat, which is not hard to do when you're on a beautiful spring Seattle day. Would you mind leading us, Taran?
Not at all.
This Shabbat song, Yedid Nefesh, speaks of standing and leaping like a deer in awe of Shabbat, of the experience of Shabbat. What would that be like to really stand in awe of the beauty of creation? That's what this particular Shabbat is about. I welcome you. I say Bruchim Habayim, blessings and welcome to those of you here in the sanctuary, to those of you at home who are joining us. In fact, we do this kind of kitschy thing. I know it's cringy, I know it's cheesy, but I have been on the receiving end at home, and it really is nice. So you see that camera over there, to those of you in the sanctuary, just wave to the people in the camera, and people in the camera wave back, and we'll pretend like we see it. It's so wonderful, because we really are, we're a community that has many different portals for coming in here. But on this particular Shabbat, I am so grateful to welcome Taran Weber, and you can sit if you want right now, and Alex and Jamie and Ronnie, all of whom have welcomed us here. I'm Rabbi Ruth Slotnick, and you may notice that Ronnie Schur is wearing a bright orange shirt, which isn't unusual for him, but I think today it is intentional, and I am wearing bright orange. I have a t-shirt that says Moms Demand Actions, because it's 10 years of moms, because moms who demand action on gun violence prevention. And this Shabbat across North America is a Shabbat that we're dedicating to understanding why we as a community want to stand up against the gun violence that we know is a poison, is an epidemic in our community. And so in fact, we're going to be talking about that a little bit during the course of the service. And I just want you to know that, because that means we're going to be talking about some violent imagery. We'll do it in a way that's appropriate, because you only talk about these things on Shabbat, because Shabbat is a little taste of the world to come. Shabbat is a reminder to us that we have within our ability as human beings, with the spark of the divine, to create the world we want to live in. Shabbat is our time to take a deep breath in. I'll invite you to do that now. Take a deep breath in and out. And let the stresses of the week stay behind outside these doors. And let's create the world we want to live in within the walls of this sanctuary right now, and as we connect with others. So we're going to take a few moments, and I'm going to invite you to wish Shabbat Shalom to those who are around you, and maybe not just the people you came with, who you're probably sitting next to, but maybe even someone new who you haven't met before. Let's take a moment to do that. So I'm just going to make it, I'm going to be totally transparent. It's a heavy sweater, so it's orange. You all saw that I wore orange for gun violence prevention, and now I can just put my tallis on. Taryn's given me the A-OK, it's just fine. And if Taryn says it's okay, it's wonderful. So really, this Shabbat, we'll be joining together in community and doing what we always do, which is bringing in the light and trying to foster the light within, even as we try and work against the forces around in our world that try to quench that light. And so we begin with lighting the candles of Shabbat, and I have to say, I just spent a little bit of Shabbat time with Ted and Susan Clasteran's granddaughter, Elena, who already brought in Shabbat. So I thought it was only fair if her grandparents lit the lights of Shabbat. And so please join us on page 2 as Ted and Susan light the lights of Shabbat for us.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner Shabbat.
And I said to Susan and Ted, I hope we didn't give you the trick candles or the trick matches. But I want to say hello, Rabbi Krauser, is it? I want to say hello to a rabbinic colleague. And I just want to say that being a rabbi, you'll understand that if we can't light it, it's just because we're taking gun violence prevention so seriously that we won't have any kind of fire or ignition whatsoever. But here we go. And so Susan or Ted, whichever one would you read? You can do, yeah, okay, maybe the top two.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Thank you so much. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. And you'd be very proud of Elena. She danced beautifully. And so we take this moment now to welcome in Shabbat as the sun is descending in the sky, as we're bringing in that sense of peace, that sense of rest that comes with Shabbat. We'll sing Lecha Dodi, and this is a version that was written by Temple Beth Am's own Sean Weaver. It's kind of like a lullaby. I always think of it as a way to sort of gently help us transition from the busy week into the restfulness of Shabbat. Lecha Dodi is on page 20. As always, we'll sing verses 1, 2, 5, and in the 9th and final verse, if you're willing and able, we'll rise and welcome in Shabbat.
סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה, לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי, 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 שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת
Please rise in body or spirit
נקבלה.
as we welcome in Shabbat.
בואי ושלום, עטרת פעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמונה עם סגולה. בואי כלה, בואי כלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
I must say, when I was told that this Shabbat would be the Shabbat of gun violence prevention, I thought, it's a strange theme for Shabbat, isn't it? It's such a strange theme. And I don't know if you saw this study that came out a few years ago, but it was a study that showed symbols, and people were asked to make connections. So they showed a teacup, and people said, oh, Great Britain. And they showed a maple leaf, and people said, oh, yeah, of course, that's Canada. And they showed the pyramids, and they said Egypt. And they showed a gun, and they said, ah, that's the United States. That is who we are known as in the world, is the nation that makes idols out of guns. And it was then that I thought, okay, I can understand why we take a Shabbat and we dedicate it to what we can do in our communities, in our congregation, within ourselves. As my classmate and friend, Rabbi Robert Nosenchuk, has said, we know better every time when we hear about gun violence. And for those of you who are members, you know that what we have become, what our custom is here at Temple Beth Am, is that whenever there is massive gun violence, and that is considered to be gun violence of 5 deaths or more, we announce it in our Kaddish list. We add it to our Mournish Kaddish, so we never become inured to it. So we never ignore the reality of gun violence, because we know better. We who are heir to the Jewish prophetic tradition, we who know Isaiah's message of beating swords and spears into plowshares and pruning hooks, we know better. That's why we as Jews ought to stop being shocked by the frequency of gun violence, and we do well to stop calling such attacks unbelievable. With the anguish our nation has faced at the hands of aggressors, we know that these attacks are perfectly believable, and we know that we can resist it. We know that we can help create the world we want to live in. That is what Shabbat is about, and that is why it makes sense to me that we do take a moment in this beautiful spring Shabbat, where life blooms all around us, to lift up the creator of all life, as we rise now in body or spirit for the Baruch Hu on page 28. transformation. Please join me at the bottom of page 31 as we say this variation on our prayer, Ma'ariv Rabim, about the transformation of day into night. This is an hour of change. Within it, we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'ma'ariv Aravim. Ahavat Olam, page 32.
Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Hamechavta, Amcha Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mashpatim, otanu lemadeta, otanu lemadeta. Alkein Adonai Eloheinu v'shachbeinu ukfumeinu nasiach b'chukecha v'nismach b'divrei toratecha u'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed ki hem hayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'layla nege yomam v'layla ve'hahavarcha al tasir mimenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael, ohev amo Yisrael.
When we hear once again about gun violence, about some senseless act of murder, we feel pain as though we ourselves were the victims. Every time someone is murdered, we ourselves are offended, and God is offended, for we are all inextricably linked to one another. We are one. And so we recite the Shema, we raise our voice and collectively affirm the oneness at the heart of the universe, the oneness of which we are all a part.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Shem kevod malchuto leolam va'ed, leolam va'ed. Shem kevod malchuto leolam va'ed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Please be seated. It's an honor to invite Mia Merenstein up to lead us in the Via Hafta. And I hear we're in for a treat tomorrow morning at 10:30 as Mia is called to Torah as a bat mitzvah. Page 36. Do you need your...
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קודשים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Kol hakavod. What a beautiful job. And we're so grateful that Mia is here tonight and she will be helping us later. Yes. She's like, can I please go down and sit? And so we take a moment now as we're feeling this gratitude to God for God's oneness, this gratitude for the love that goes door to door from generation to generation that connects us to one another. We are grateful too to our ancestors who made it through a dark and narrow place and were able to sing songs of liberation. We turn now to page 40 as we sing our ancestors' song of freedom, Nichamocha, where we say, who is like you, O God, where we recognize with awe in the creation all around us, and we pray that we one day all will be free of the illness that would want us to harm one another. Michamocha, page 40.
Who is like you, Adonai? Who is like you, Adonai? Ya na 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 ya na 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 מלכותך ראו בניך בוקע הים לפני משה ומרים זה אלינו ואמרו זה אלי אנו ואמרו
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up wanting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim. Hashkivenu, page 42.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom, v'hamidenu mamenu l'chaim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen. 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 Amen.
We turn now to the Amidah, the central prayers, the Tefillah. They're on page 46. Please rise in body or in spirit.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agita hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, וקונה החוב וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך אוסר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, הוא מקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
We'll continue with the rest of the tefillah in silence. Perhaps you'd like to be guided by the words of our ancestors through page 62 or by the still small voice within. When your personal prayer is done, please feel free to be seated.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'yako Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'yako Yisrael.
We always take a moment on these Friday evenings to say a prayer of healing. And as we pray for members in our own community who are in need of healing of body or soul, let our thoughts also think about those who have been impacted by gun violence, maybe someone they love or they themselves, maybe too, our thoughts, if we expand our hearts wide enough, can be to go out to all those who suffer mental illness of any kind, who need help, who need intervention before violence occurs. But we also always want to remember that there are some of us who have walked through the doors of this sanctuary or perhaps sit at home this evening and have someone very intentional in mind for our prayers for healing. I invite you now, if you choose to say those names out loud. We hold in our hearts. We continue now with our Mishra Beirach L'Cholim, our prayer for healing, page 253.
Misha Beirach Avoteinu, Misha May the Holy One in mercy give them strength. May the Holy One grant healing to them soon, body and soul. Misha Beirach Avoteinu, Misha Beirach Himoteinu, Hu Yevarech V'Rapeh HaCholin V'Nomar
May each and everyone know a refuah shlema, a full and speedy recovery of body and of soul. So it's crazy to think that at the end of this month, I will finish up my 9th year at Temple Beth Am. And I say that because many years ago now, it's fair to say 8 years ago, we had as our scholar in residence the former ambassador for interreligious affairs for the United States, also the former head of the Religious Action Center, the lobbying arm of the Union for Reform Judaism, Rabbi David Saperstein, on this very bima. And Rabbi Saperstein is an incredible speaker about our prophetic tradition of justice. And he has said, our gun-flooded, violence-prone society has turned weapons into idols, guns into idols. And the appropriate religious response to idolatry is sustained moral outrage. Sustained moral outrage. I remember when the mass gun violence at Sandy Hook happened. The children who were murdered then were the exact age of my daughter Susanna, and we were living within 45 minutes of Sandy Hook at that time. So it felt very real to me. I thought I really understood from the inside what I felt like I understood those parents of those first graders. My daughter is looking at colleges. Their children are a memory. I thought I understood. I thought I understood then. And then, and some of you may remember this, I'm here long enough now that you may not, but you may, that a few years after Rabbi Saperstein was our scholar in residence, I came in very shaken to Friday night services because I had a text from one of my older brothers that said, "Dad's okay, but call me right away." And so, of course, you get a text like that, you stop the car, you call. And it turned out that our cousin's ex-wife, so not even someone that close to me in true honesty, but an incredible human being who raised two glorious young people, was shot to death on the steps of the preschool where she worked by an ex-boyfriend. To death in front of these little people. And I stood on this bima and I said, I never thought that gun violence would impact me personally. That was 7 years ago. Now, every single Shabbat, just in the time that I have served Temple Beth Am in the last 9 years, the increase in gun violence in our country has been raised to epidemic proportions, I believe. I believe that what Rabbi David Saperstein has said is that we have a right to be standing on this Shabbat to speak about gun violence prevention because our religious response needs to be, as he says, sustained moral outrage. And yet, we're here on Shabbat. We're here on Parshat Naso, which perhaps is known for some of the most famous words of blessing in the whole world. The oldest words of blessing in our tradition, the Birkat Kohanim, the priestly benediction. May God bless and keep you. May God's light shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God be with you and grant you peace. We say it each Shabbat to our children. We say it each Shabbat to our Bar Mitzvah students. You're going to get that tomorrow, Mia, I promise you. These words of blessing, so simple, so simple. Speak through the ages, through the generations, of why we want to have moral outrage, why that's the religious response to gun violence, that's why we talk about it on Shabbat. Because what the priestly benediction reminds us is that each one of us has the divine within and around us. I want to share a teaching from Rabbi Naftali Zvi Yehuda Berlin, who's known as the Netziv, a 19th century teacher, who suggests that the priestly blessing, these words that are so beautiful, in Hebrew they're said in the singular, even though the priest stood before the whole community to say them. They're said in the singular, and he suggests, Rabbi Berlin, for the one that they're said in the singular, so you can say, for the one engaged in Torah blessings, and for the one who engaged in trade for success in business, for this one, and for that one, and for that one, for every individual person who is in there. There is a recognition in the priestly blessing of the preciousness of each individual life, but even more so, the Netziv, Rabbi Naftali Zvi Yehuda Berlin, suggests that not only that, what God is suggesting is that may God bless you and protect you, lest the very blessing you receive turn into a stumbling block. That we each in our individuality are precious, and we do have the divine spark within, but that our blessings so often can become a stumbling block, something that stops us from being able to realize that divine spark within. We know this. We know this on the simplest level. I'll use myself as an example. I think in concepts. That's what I do. Anyone who knows me well knows that I think in concepts. So if you want the details for something, I ain't your gal. My blessing to think in big, abstract ways means that I'm not able always to see the details. I love this teaching. It's so nuanced about what the priestly blessing can mean. It's such an interesting way of helping us understand how we as progressive religious Jewish community can respond to gun violence. And I suggest this because I think what the Netziv is understanding in this understanding of the priestly blessing is what the Talmud teaches, which is that to save a life is to save the entire universe. And to destroy a life is to destroy an entire universe. But the Netziv himself is a nuanced figure. He was a member of the Mitnagdim. He was opposed to the Hasidim, opposed to a more psychological, emotional approach. He was opposed to the Haskalah, to Jews who brought in the Enlightenment, and yet, even with that, he allowed some secular studies in his yeshiva, and he believed that Torah, in addition to being Torah, was poetry, was art. He was in the center of the culture wars of his time, and rather than seeing things in a binary black or white way, he recognized there were ways to connect. He recognized that what we are receiving when we've received these words of blessing from our tradition is the recognition that you and you and you and you and you and I, we all have that spark, and we are put on this earth to help cultivate that spark within. The conversation around gun violence prevention in 2023 in North America is part of our culture wars that we're at the heart of. And I want to suggest that this teaching from the Netziv may be helpful for us. Because I am grateful to live in the United States. I am grateful to live in this land of freedom. But maybe, just maybe, in the conversation around gun violence prevention, the blessing of American freedom has become a little bit of a stumbling block for us in our own culture war discussions. And maybe, just maybe, In our protection of individual rights, we have overlooked how we need to nourish and cultivate and support others. Maybe what we can do as part of a religious response to the gun violence epidemic in our country is to shift the way we talk about it and to shift the way we understand how the dangers of gun violence affect not just the victims themselves, but our whole nation. This is why, even in our Misha Berach, we offered up our prayers to those who are victims to mental illness, to those who think a gun may be the only solution to their own despair. My prayer on this Shabbat, when we wear orange, thank you, Ronnie, when we recognize that gun violence feels intractable, but is not, when we come together on Shabbat to recognize we can create the world we want to live in, I say, may we each hold within us the capacity to look at the other and bless them in their individuality, in all of their nuances. And may we recognize that our moral outrage about gun violence is not outrage, it's not anger to create a further division in our country. It is not designed to keep us on two sides, but rather designed to help bring us together and understand that the blessing of freedom that we all benefit from is a blessing that can also help us as a progressive Jewish community to cultivate and foster the spark of the divine in all human beings. This is why on this Shabbat, the Shabbat of the priestly blessing, we bring our attention to gun violence as a way to move ourselves, our congregation, our city, and God willing, our nation towards greater blessing so that we all may walk in a path of peace. Amen. Thank you. So we rise now for Aleinu L'Shabeach. It is on page 282. We will read at the top of page 282.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon ha'kol, l'teiz gidulav yotzer bereshit, shehu notei shamayim v'yoser haaretz, u'moshav yekarov v'shamayim imal, u'shiknatu so v'tovei meromim, u'Eloheinu einot, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim modim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'ne'emar Adonai, melech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu, yehyeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad, u'shemo echad.
Please be seated. On this Shabbat, we're remembering Carol Field, who died in the last week. We're commemorating Shiva for her. She's the mother of Richard Agress, mother-in-law of Yolanda, grandmother of Bernie, Caroline, and Sally. And we're in the month of Shiloshim for Louise Leader, wife of Alan of blessed memory, mother of David and Jonathan, mother-in-law of Susan and Bonnie, grandmother of Tirza, Sharon, and Dana, grandmother-in-law to Matthew, and great-grandmother to Ziva, aunt and great-aunt to many. We're also remembering these loved ones whose yahrzeit, the anniversary of their death, falls at this time. Israel Ben Shloma, Doris Kaplan, Nathan Davis, Karen Deutsch, Rala Eisenberg, Evelyn French, Thelma Grunbaum, Hyman Harris, Ralph Hirschstein, Herbert Katz, Keith Copeland, Aubrey Court, Stephen Krafchick, Joe Kraft, Harry Lipson, Roberta Massoff, Malka Madelon, Arlene Milligan, Jane Newberger, Nancy Paris, Morton Popkin, Albert Schneider, Eugene Settle, Evelyn Seidel, Yvette Silberman, Annette Serlin, Jeanette Smith, Irving Steinman, Virginia Stout, Elizabeth Zodek, and I invite you to add the names of anyone that you'd like to include at this time of Kaddish, or anyone whose name I may have mispronounced. Oh, sorry. As we read the Mourner's Kaddish, let us remember to include in our prayers all of those who have been killed by senseless gun violence. Let us remember the parents who will not see their children grow up. Let us remember the children who will never grow up. Let us remember the brothers and sisters and siblings for whom an empty seat reminds us of their absence, the friend who no longer calls. And let us remember for whom there is no one left to say Kaddish. We are taught never to grieve alone, for we are made stronger by the bonds of our community. It is our charge to share in the grief of those around us, so that none of us must suffer with loss and solitude. If you've lost a loved one in the last week or the last month, I invite you to rise and please remain standing, or in the last year. And if you're here tonight commemorating a yahrzeit, I invite you to please rise. And then it's our custom, if you choose to rise in body or spirit as one community in solidarity with the mourners among us, as we continue with the Mourner's Kaddish, page 294. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah, v'alma divrach chirute, v'anlik malchute, v'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chaye dekol Beit Yisrael, Bagala ubizman kari v'yimru, amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevarach leolam olmei olmaya. Yitbarak v'yishtabak v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei dekudasha b'rechu. Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiran v'alma v'yimru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'yimru, amen. Zikronam livracha, may their memories be for blessing, amen. Please be seated. And so in just a minute, we are going to take a moment to think about some joyous moments, some simchas among us. But we know that there is no joy without gratitude. And so as Temple Beth Am, we are so very grateful that this gathering on this particular Shabbat is happening on coastal Salish land, specifically of the Duwamish tribe. And in addition to gratitude, we as a community commit ourselves to learning more and continuing to actively support Indigenous people and their tribes. And so we continue to make a monthly donation to the United Indians of All Tribes Foundation and commit as a community to continuing to learn more about our Indigenous neighbors. And with that, we also like to take a moment to share joy in the same way that we share prayers for healing, with the thought that our sharing that will help maybe diminish some of the pain that we feel. We know that when we share joy, the joy expands. So I don't know, maybe you're having like a major life cycle event happening, or maybe there's some small joy that you'd like to share, but I'm feeling some energy here. I'm wondering maybe if you guys want to start sharing some.
Our daughter Mia's bat mitzvah is tomorrow.
Woohoo! And so we say mazel tov to you, Mia, and to all of your family. And please join us tomorrow morning at 10:30 as Mia helps lead us in prayer and study. Any other simchas? Okay, I'm going to start here. And please share your name.
My name is Ronnie, and my joy this week was that I changed a light bulb. But it was the turn indicator on my car, and I needed Jamie's help, and we had to pull out this 2-foot-long light fixture and dig in and pull out. It was a real ordeal.
And my joy was that Toby, married to Ronnie, my joy is that I didn't have to go out there and help.
And just in case you don't know, Toby and Ronnie are connected to Jamie, who is behind that box there, helping us connect with all of you at home and all of us here. And I know that Jamie, I can only imagine how she helped. So mazel tov on change. How many shurs does it take to change a light bulb?
Anne, pronouns are she, her, and I had my first meeting with one of the rabbis here for my conversion process.
Yeah, Veronica, and I just finished my sophomore year of college, and I, before that, met with the rabbi there on conversion.
Wonderful. So mazel tov to you too. I'm feeling a lot of joy on this side of the room. I'm wondering if anyone wants to share anything on this side of the room. No pressure, but I know some of you.
Hi, my name is Michaela. I took my very first trip to London a couple weeks ago, and I fell in love with it. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Michelle Berg. Our son Alex and his fiancee Kathleen are getting married in 2.5 months in Galway, and they surprised us all last week of buying a house. So right before they get married.
Wonderful. Mazel tov. Any other joys? Well, we share all these joys. Mia, you can come on up. We share all of these joys because a joy shared is a joy that expands. And now we are so grateful to Mia, who's going to help us lead us in the Kiddush. But just give me 1 second. And the Kiddush is on page 5, I believe.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon Hinchilanu zikaron l'maseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila lemikra kodesh zecher tziat mitzrayim ki vanu v'ha mikol hamim v'shabbat kodecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
And then you can take a little sip, and I promise it's grape juice. Is it grape juice? It's grape juice. And mazel tov to Mia. And now I'll invite you all to join Taran and me. And Mia, you can stay up here for the motzi as we say the motzi together, so that when you go out, you can have some challah outside. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz b'te'avon. And to make that a kosher blessing, you want to take a little piece of challah, and you can even take a piece for your brother too, and then you can have a seat. And so we're going to continue on page 341 with these words from Isaiah. Nation shall not take up sword against nation. We shall have weapons of destruction no more. They shall never again study war. Lo Yisagoi, page 341.
Lo Yisagoi el goi cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo Yisagoi el goi cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo Yisagoi el goi cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo Yisagoi el goi cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo Yisagoi el goi cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo Yisagoi el goi cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo Yisagoi el goi cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo Yisagoi el goi cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo Yisagoi el goi cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama. Lo Yisagoi el goi cheret, lo yilmedu od milchama.
Aaron, Alex, Janie, Ronnie, and Rebecca, and thank you all for being here, both here and at home. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.